Welcome back to the Ultimate Podcast, everybody. As always, it's me, Hunter Heike, the Community Engagement Manager in the Mid-Atlantic, joined by my lovely co-host, Lauren.
I'm Lauren Rowe, the Community Engagement Manager in the West.
Yes, and we also have a special guest today. Dr. Myers, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Paisley Myers, and I joined CureSearch earlier this year, at the beginning of 2024, as the Director of Research and Program. And I'll just share a little bit about my background. So it's actually in chemistry, and for the past maybe 15 years or so, I've held various research roles in different settings. So some in academia, in healthcare, and in biotech. And I've largely been focused on developing cancer immunotherapies and managing clinical trials.
Incredible stuff. We're super excited and lucky to have Dr. Myers joining us at CureSearch. We wanted to utilize this episode as an opportunity to peel back the curtain, as it were, as to what our research and fundraising techniques are. Obviously, everybody being a part of the Ultimate Hike, we understand that there's fundraising goals associated with that. And we understand that we are going to fund research that's going towards the eradication of pediatric cancer. But what does that actually mean on a day-to-day basis? So that is why we decided to invite Dr. Myers here to discuss with Lauren and I, and then hopefully you guys will listen as Ultimate Hiker alumni and new hikers as well. So, Lauren, I'll let you ask the first question, and then we will get into a little bit about what makes CureSearch special and what our research process looks like.
Yeah. Paisley, would you mind sharing with us, we know we're all committed to doing what we can to end childhood cancer, but can you share more about what CureSearch mission is exactly and why it's so important? Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really important to always tie back to the why with what we're doing. And so our official mission at CureSearch is to end childhood cancer by driving targeted and innovative research with measurable results in an accelerated timeframe. But essentially what that boils down to is that we want to find new treatments for children and we want to find them now. So when we think about the landscape of pediatric cancer, there's about 42 kids today that are diagnosed with cancer in the United States, which is about 15,000 kids per year. And because of this, childhood cancer is considered rare when it's compared to other things that are much more prevalent, like adult cancers, for instance. But just because something is less prevalent, obviously doesn't make it less important. And I think that even though childhood cancer is rare, it's still really devastating for those 42. When we think about childhood cancer as a whole, it is true that the overall survival rate is increasing. I think if you look on average, it's about 85% survival at 5 years, which is really great, but I don't think that tells the whole story. So when you drill down into the different types of cancers that affect children, you really don't see those high survival rates across the board. So for instance, neuroblastoma, which is the most common solid tumor in children outside of brain tumors, is a type of cancer that primarily affects children. Most cases are diagnosed by the age of 5. And about half the kids that are diagnosed with neuroblastoma are diagnosed with a high-risk disease. And for that, the survival rate is less than 50%. It's really clear that there's a need for new treatment. And in terms of the treatments that we have, I do think we have more options now than we had in the past. But one of the issues is that most of the treatments kids receive are largely toxic. Many of the standard of care treatments that are being used today were developed decades ago, and they were originally developed for adults. They weren't originally meant to be for children and their developing bodies. And so what that leads to is that you have a large percentage, so about 2/3 of the kids that survive a childhood cancer diagnosis go on to experience really severe chronic health conditions later in life, and more of them than the average person would, which is largely due to the toxic treatments that they receive as a child. Knowing all of that, I think that it's clear that there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. But unfortunately, research funding in pediatric cancer is just really inadequate. The majority of federal funding goes towards adult cancer research, and there's much less in general for pediatric cancer. So I think that's what's important to remember. That's really where CureSearch comes into play, is that we do provide that critical funding that helps advance new treatments forward, specifically for children with cancer.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting as somebody who's, not in the research space, not a scientist, not nearly smart enough to call myself a doctor. But not having the experience and understanding of like the research space in general and also the types of treatments that are out there existing. We can talk about, as Lauren and I do, that we focus on the rarest and most difficult types to treat, but we don't necessarily know exactly what that means functionally. So having your perspective of being like, hey, we're actually stepping in areas of that we see of need, I think is really important to remember as we talk to all of the ultimate hikers as they go, as they're doing fundraising, as they're talking to their friends and family when it comes to the events that they're going towards. Like, what exactly does CureSearch do? It's good to have that foundation of
Mhm.
finding the rarest types of cancers, the most difficult to treat, and also making them just less toxic, to your
Right.
point. And I think that is part of what makes the CureSearch funding unique. But I was curious about your thoughts on what kind of, in your mind, makes CureSearch stand out from other different cancer nonprofits that I'm sure other people have heard of.
Yeah, no, and I think you're exactly right with that. We focus on areas of high unmet need, right? So we don't just fund any and all pediatric cancer research. We're really looking at those cancers that have the lowest overall survival rate, the ones with very few or damaging treatment options, and then also cancers that can affect underserved populations like adolescents and young adults. So we're really drilling down into where are the greatest unmet needs and then funding proposals to address those. So I think that's unique. And I also think that I would say the biggest thing that differentiates CureSearch is that we really are laser focused on new drug development. So if a project is not on an accelerated path towards that, then we don't fund it. And I think that's critical because if your goal is to get new treatments to the children who need them now, which of course is our goal at CureSearch, then everything we fund really has to be viewed through that lens of, is this actually going to make it to children and can it do so quickly? So I think that's a unique thing about CureSearch. And with that in mind, one thing that we incorporate into our review process, and I don't know of any other funding organization that does this, is we include review by our industry advisory council. So that's a group of mostly pediatric oncologists that have transitioned into industry, and they review the proposals that we receive through that lens of how likely is it to make it to market? Is it commercializable? Is there a clear path forward for it? So I think we're unique in incorporating that piece into the review process. And I think that is what really helps us ensure that we are funding things that really do support new drug development.
So I think like when I first, got involved with the organization and reading through all of the wonderful things that you said and what makes us unique and the type of research we're funding and all of those things, I'm really impressed by how like 60% of our funded research will go on to clinical trial and move forward within the cancer space. But can you like kind of explain how it is the scientific advisory councils and the things that make us unique that really drive that number forward so advanced compared to other maybe organizations? Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's really a testament to our rigorous review process. So the award you're talking about specifically with our preclinical research is our Acceleration Initiative Award, which is for up to $1.5 million, and that to support preclinical research that's expected to reach patients within 3 years. So what we expect is that by the end of that award period, those investigators will be transitioning their therapy into a clinical trial. And 60% of the projects that we funded through that mechanism have gone on to clinical trials, which is compared to an 8% national average. So that's, our projects are 7 times more likely to reach the clinic, and that's where the majority of children are treated. And like I said, I think that's largely due to our rigorous review process where we're reviewing these with our scientific review committee, which are academic researchers. We're reviewing them with our industry advisory council to look at how likely they are to make it forward and be a commercializable drug. And then we're also bringing everything back to our scientific advisory council that kind of takes all of that information together and looks at the whole picture and helps us select proposals for funding that represent the best scientific research with the highest potential of making it ticket.
I love that.
Yeah, I think
It's
it's really important to highlight the successes that we have. To your point, 60% of ours, which is 7 times more than the national average, go to the clinical trial stage. If we are an organization and, if I'm thinking about how to make the most effective or more successful research projects, that is an incredible benchmark that we are, going above and beyond leaps and bounds, which speaks to the efficacy of our scientific advisory and industry advisory councils. Which I think also kind of plays into what we want to do as an organization, which is be somewhat collaborative. I know Lauren and I talk a lot about being volunteer led when it comes to our community engagement with our community leadership boards, our ultimate hikers, our ambassadors, and alumni. But I also think that there's opportunity when it comes to collaboration just in the research space in general, because I know that we have done co-funded research. I was curious to see what the collaboration kind of looks like in the research aspect.
Yeah, I think we're definitely big on co-funding. I think it's really important in the pediatric cancer space. There's not a lot of federal funding available for pediatric cancer research. And so I think that CureSearch and other similar organizations really do play that crucial role of filling that funding gap and moving new treatments forward. So with that in mind, I would say that we really value strategic partnership. I think that we all recognize that it's going to take more than one organization to move drug development forward, that no one group can do it by themselves. And so, we create and support innovative projects, but also bridge a combined funding because clinical research is really expensive. So just thinking of some that we've done in the past, we did back in 2019, we co-funded a clinical trial in patients with brain tumors with Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy. Last year in 2023, we actually entered into a joint funding initiative, which was the first time that we had done something like that. We joined in with several other organizations, including St. Baldrick's, and that was to fund a Fight Osteosarcoma Together super grant, which was supporting a preclinical project that was finding a new treatment for pediatric osteosarcoma. And then even this year in 2024, we expanded our co-funding model internationally because we partnered with LifeArc, which is a medical-based or a UK-based medical charity. And we did that to co-fund one of our Acceleration Initiative awardees who's developing a new treatment for brain tumors. So I think, we're always open to co-funding. I think the more we co-fund, the more research we can fund in general. So that's something that's really important to us. And it's something that we spend a lot of time on is pursuing those different co-funding opportunities.
That's amazing. I love that we really are committed to finding the best treatments for kids as quickly as possible. And we don't let really anything get in the way of that. We want to co-fund, we want to bring collaborators together from all across the pediatric cancer space and really focus on that mission and driving it forward. And I think everything you just said is really a testament to that and what makes us unique. Since we kind of know the history and how we pick those projects and how we're so laser focused on less toxic treatments for kids and how we can get that to the bedside faster. Can you talk about what the 3 grants we offer are and walk us through what those look like and how they lead to new treatments for kids?
Yeah. And I think it's important to start off before I talk about the awards to talk about the type of research that we fund overall. We're strategically funding translational research that supports new drug development for pediatric cancer. And what I mean by translational research is that when you think about the entire drug development process, you have really a spectrum where on one side you have your basic science research, which is very abundant. It's less risky, it's less expensive, and there's a lot of federal funding available for that. And then on the opposite side, you have your late phase clinical trials where therapies have been de-risked. And so a lot of times pharma or biotech will join in to bring a drug to market. But it's really that in between where there's a lot that happens. You have late basic research, preclinical development, early phase clinical trials. And that's actually referred to as the translational funding gap because it's an area that lacks government funding. It lacks pharma and biotech funding. And promising treatments can't move forward because they don't have the financial support available to allow them to do. And so at CureSearch, we strategically fund within that gap because we want to help de-risk research projects so that they can move forward and pharma and biotech can pick them up and take them the rest of the way to commercialization. So in order to do that, we have 3 distinct awards that we offer. They're all provided over 3 years, and we require that any of the proposals that we fund have to have a clear path to clinic, if not already there. Because again, we're always going back to that mission of supporting new drug development. So one of our awards is our Young Investigator Award, and that is for $225,000. And it's intended to support our early stage investigators that are pursuing a career in pediatric cancer. We consider a young investigator to be someone who's within 6 years of finishing their training. And that's the group where it can be hard to secure funding, to establish their independence, set up their lab. And so these grants are like a way to jumpstart their research career. And even at the young investigator level, we're still looking at what's the path to clinic for the project they're working on. Then we mentioned already, but our Acceleration Initiative Award, which is $1.5 million, that's supporting preclinical research that's expected to reach patients within 3 years. And then we also have our largest award, which is our Catapult Award. And that's for up to $2.5 million. And that one is specifically to support phase 1 or phase 2 clinical trials of new treatments in children with cancer. So all of those projects, anything we select for funding, we're reviewing them based on scientific merit as well as commercialization potential, because we want to make sure that we're selecting projects for funding that not only represent the strongest research, but also the highest potential of actually making it to children.
I think it's really enlightening, not only for us as staff members to be reminded of the work that we do, but also the hikers that are going to be listening to this who may not know the specifics behind it. And again, I understand that, not even myself is going to come out of this podcast episode being an expert when it comes to the things that CureSearch does. But I do think it is helpful to know that the things that we are doing is we're doing it for a specific reason. We have a goal in mind, and we're actively trying to reach that every single day with the way that we work in our research and our scientific and industry advisory councils. So I know that you talked a lot about the different grant cycles and all the things that we have funded. I was curious to know if you had an example of a project or a potential success story that CureSearch has funded that has made a special impact on you, or just one that you want to highlight.
Yeah, I think, and I know we talked about it a little bit. If anyone watching this was on that virtual hike call last night, but it's probably our best example. I mentioned that we partnered with the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy previously, and that was to co-fund a clinical trial. It was actually one of our earliest Catapult Awards, which are our clinical trial awards. And that went to Dr. Crystal Makel, who's at Stanford University. And she was conducting a phase 1 clinical trial of a CAR T-cell therapy, which is a type of immunotherapy for patients with diffuse midline glioma, which is a class of lethal brain or spinal cord tumors. So in this clinical trial, they actually just published the result earlier this week, and it really is amazing. It's, I encourage anyone watching to go read about it. You don't have to read the actual scientific paper, but there's lots of articles online. And so far, they've treated 11 patients, and 9 of those have actually been able to regain the ability to do things that their tumor had affected. So that regaining the ability to walk, to hear, to smile, it's really incredible. And also, the tumors are shrinking with the therapy as well. So I think it was 4 patients that had their tumor shrink by over 50%, which is really incredible. But I think the most moving thing about that trial is that there's actually one patient who was being treated for DIPG, which is a subtype of diffuse midline glioma that affects the brainstem. And that patient is actually tumor-free 4 years after diagnosis. So there's no evidence of the tumor on his brain scans. And just to put that in perspective, how incredible that is. Patients with DIPG, only about 10% of them survive 2 years after diagnosis, and less than 1% survive 5 years. So the fact that this patient is tumor-free 4 years later is just really incredible. And it's really cool to see how our funding has actually gone to support something that's so groundbreaking. Like I said, I would encourage everyone to look into that trial. There's actually a video of that patient struggling to walk prior to the treatment and then walking on his own after the treatment, which is really moving and will definitely make you cry.
I teared up watching it the other day.
I know.
I know we've talked about her at Ultimate Hike across like the years as we've kind of seen her project progress, and like kids riding their bikes or having that quality of life and what that means for them and their families. But when I read like he actually has no tumor, I was like, and then saw him walk is amazing.
I know. It really is. And that trial's still ongoing. So I think they're going to continue to enroll patients and hopefully see more and more patients that are still tumor-free years later, which, like I said, is a really drastic improvement for the IPG.
Yeah, I think it would be really impactful for anybody who's participated in Ultimate Hike or thinking about it to look up what you guys have just been talking about. A lot of times it's very hard to see the visual of the impact that we're making. You know, you fundraise money and then that money goes to research, but you're not in the research labs, you're not talking to the doctors on a day-to-day basis, you're not seeing the patients that are in these clinical trials. So it can be difficult sometimes for people who are supporting CureSearch and the research that we do to see what their success looks like or see what their impact is. So that's something that we always try and do as community engagement team is make sure that the people who have partnered with us and agree with our mission and want to see the, eradication of pediatric cancer, that they see the successes that are coming from this so that they truly know what impact they're making as an individual. Because the collaboration of us and our volunteers, us and different co-funding models, we understand that we can't do this on our own. So having that as something to hold on to, I think is really impactful for our hikers.
We've talked about a lot, so I want to not overwhelm our listeners with information, but is there anything that you maybe want to share or kind of really drive home about the mission or anything that we might have missed from your view of what CureSearch is doing and the research and the funding that we're granting?
Thinking about the intended audience for this being people who maybe have done a hike or have signed up to do one or considering to do one, I think that the Ultimate Hike is a really cool event. And I think it's impressive to say that you hiked 20 plus miles in a day because I can't do that. So I think they should feel proud that they're doing something so challenging. But I just want to, I don't know, reiterate that you should also feel proud that you're supporting such a good cause. I think that we've collectively made really good strides in cancer research and childhood cancer research, but there's so much more that needs to be done. And I think that CureSearch, for the size that we are, I think we're really maximizing the impact of our funding. And I really do wholeheartedly believe that we're changing the treatment landscape for children with cancer. We talked about how our free clinical awards are 7 times more likely to reach the clinic, which is huge. And then we also have our clinical trial awards that are actually enrolling and treating patients today. So I think none of it would be possible if we didn't have people that hiked and supporters. And so I would just say thank you for being involved in CureSearch and for the effort that you put into fundraising. I think that everyone can feel confident that it really does make a difference.
Yeah, we've got an incredible group of hikers, coaches, volunteers, ambassadors. We always want to make sure that they feel appropriately thanked for the work that they do for our organization. So if anybody's out there who's been a coach or volunteer or a hiker, know that I, Hunter Heike, love you unequivocally. And we really appreciate the support that you guys give the organization. But I guess to wrap it up, Dr. Myers, we appreciate you coming here. Now that you've been a part of an Ultimate Hike, remind us again which hike that you were at this past year.
Yeah, I went to the Fall Foothills Ultimate Hike in November. And I did not hike. I was a volunteer, but maybe one year I will hike it.
So you know how appreciative we are of you, not only as a staff member, but now as a volunteer. But this being the ultimate podcast, we have to ask the ultimate hike question of the day, which is now that you've attended one, although you haven't gone the full 20 something miles, what was your favorite memory from the hike weekend?
Overall, it was just a really well organized event. I think it was clear that a lot of prep went into it and everything ran so smoothly, which I really liked. I think my favorite part was probably Friday night when we had the dinner and we talked about the mission and just about the hike in general. But we also had a chance for us to go around the room and everyone to say why they were hiking and what their involvement was with CureSearch. And I think that was really cool to hear because it was a good mix. And there were some people who just happened to stumble across the hike and thought it would be a really cool challenge. And so they were doing it. And then there were also people who maybe had lost a child to cancer or knew a child with cancer. So that was really emotional to hear that they were hiking in their honor and memory. And one of the things that was cool about this hike, and maybe it's the case for others too, but there were a lot of life seasoned hikers there. So there were people who would say this was like their 20th hike or something, which was just really impressive to see that people who have found CureSearch and become involved have stayed involved. So I think that was probably my favorite part from the weekend. And I'll definitely be back because I think I convinced my husband to do the Fall Foothills hike. So he'll be doing that next November.
It is always good having the hike alumni who have been here for many, many years because they have the perspective of well, when I started, we just then funded this type of research project, and they have the the time frame to see the types of successes that we've had. So we always love our old timer hike alumni, and we always encourage them to come back. But we always want to make sure that the new folk are invited as well. Just to your point, enjoying the hike for your first time. I did my first one this past year, and it was a wonderful experience. So we're just building our hike family one day at a time.
Yeah. You hiked it?
No, I did not. I guess I volunteered, as you could say. I was going back and forth between different aid stations. So I
Oh,
started at aid station 1, went and set up aid station 2, went and set up aid station 3. I was making sure people were taken care of when they got off the trail at Shenandoah.
yeah.
But he is going to hike a hike in 2025.
Yes, that is the plan. So if anybody's
So
hiking is listening to this and you want to try and persuade me, send me an email at hunterhikey. Not just kidding. I want to do all the different hikes. So, I hope to see anybody who's listening to this out on the trail in 2025 and beyond. So thank you, Dr. Myers, again for joining us, for your perspective on the work that we do as a research organization. I know it's going to be very enlightening for those in the Ultimate Podcast community to be listening to this and getting the perspective that you shared. So we really appreciate your time. If anybody is listening to this and wants to learn more, you can always find more information at curesearch.org/research if you're looking into that. And you can also go to ultimatehike.org if you're interested in registering or looking at more information about the hikes in 2025 and beyond. Dr. Myers, thank you for joining us again. And Lauren, as always, you ready? On 3, 1, 2, 3. Love you. Bye.